Welcome back to the Bootleg Universe. I'm Sam Lasky here with our fearless leader, Adi Shankar. Adi, would you like to introduce our incredible guest today?
One of my oldest friends in the industry, and he's really not my friend because of the industry. He's just a great guy, great human being. He's a producer. He's also a talent manager of Screenwriters. John Zaozirny. So one of the things that's like super fascinating about you, like professionally, super fascinating about you professionally, lots super fascinating personally. Professionally, you are an independent manager who formed a management company. So you have managers working under you, right? You built your own company. You're not just a manager, you're also a business owner.
Yes.
Right? Now, the management space, the talent management space has gone through a lot of consolidation. The last like 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's you have like big companies now. It's mainly big companies, right? It's like 3 Arts Management, 360, Anonymous, that kind of thing. And they keep growing and growing and growing. And they're following the agencies, the talent agencies into like almost the M&A space.
Absolutely.
Right? We're like, we don't represent talent. What we do is we actually buy companies. You're like, what?
Yeah.
So
we finance movies. Yeah.
Right. We finance movies. You are a dude in a marketplace. So you're like a bespoke indie shop, a mom and pop shop, boutique in a space with like giants. Yeah. You know, not Amazon, Netflix style giant, but giants. They're giants. They're just fucking giant Goliath entities.
Sure.
And yet, there's this thing called the Hollywood Blacklist, where executives in town, like we vote on what unmade script.
Are you a voter?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
I haven't been hitting you up in the past. I hit you up in the future.
There's so the Hollywood Blacklist. It's like a list.
The annual list of the best executives voted on the best scripts of the year.
Unproduced.
Correct. Yes.
Right.
Sorry.
And now I first heard about it when the year I moved to Los Angeles, which is 2008. I moved to 2008, and I was walking around. And I said, "There has to be like a list of scripts that."
I think it just formed the year before.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
And then someone said, it's called the Blacklist. I'm like, get me the Blacklist. What the fuck is this? So,
get me the Blacklist.
So then I get the Blacklist, and I go and just like read every script. I memorized who wrote it.
There were a lot
agents.
on it back in the day. You only needed one vote back in the day.
Yeah. And, movies like Juno, Argo,
Margin Call.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every great
movie from that era came out of the Blacklist.
Right.
I would argue
was on the Blacklist.
Was on the Blacklist, right? Like indie movies.
Yeah.
Indie movies with like a point of view and a perspective. Yeah. Some of them like the quirky ones, they all came out of that, right? And then all of a sudden, so what I find fascinating is, this is an egalitarian thing. This isn't really something that can be gamed, and it's
people think it can be, but it cannot.
It can't be gamed. There's no way to be fucking gamed.
Not on a massive level.
Not on a massive level. And if it could be gamed, it's going to be gamed by CAA.
Right.
Right? It's going to be gamed by like
a big corporation.
A big corporation. You consistently develop writers, find writers. It's you've had so many scripts at the top of the Blacklist.
Yeah.
It's insane.
I had 50%. Last 6 years, I've had the top scripts 3 times. And before that, I had the #1 script in 2016. So 50% of the time, last 6 years.
And you even like sent me a script, the wrestling script, not the world wrestling.
Yeah.
You sent me Cauliflower, and you're like, yeah, check this out. And then like 3 weeks later, I'm like, what the fuck? This is at the top of the Blacklist. This is crazy. I should have,
read it.
Well, I didn't read it. Busted. But even things that aren't at the top of the like I remember the script, the builder, about the Trump. It's like it's interesting material. You have I
also had the most scripts in the Blacklist last year of all the management companies, tied with CAA. It's got to brag slightly.
So this is like insane, bro. This is like who's the dude that made Moneyball about?
Billy Bean.
Yeah, you're like Billy Bean.
I honestly modeled the company when I was first starting off after Billy Bean.
Really?
Yeah, because Billy Bean didn't have the money, didn't have the resources. So he's like, what are the places that people aren't looking? What are the things people are not paying attention to? So that was something I looked at and I was like, okay, this is one way I could do that.
And so what are those scripts? Like, what is the commonality between them that you look for or develop and that ends up having success?
I mean, look, I would say there's, in terms of the actual content of the script, is there things that I would personally want to read. That's the only thing I can go from, is something that I personally would want to read. Now, look, what I would say is something that's more commercially oriented may or may not make the blacklist, because, the blacklist veers a little bit almost like Sundance or the Oscar movies, a little bit more towards the quirkier side of things. So a horror movie may have a little rougher time getting on the blacklist than a quirky biopic. But that doesn't mean that horror movies can't get, I've had a lot of horror movies get on the blacklist. So, and you could argue, I guess, Cauliflower, the number one script last year was a horror script, in a way, kind of body horror. So, it's one of those things where you're kind of aware, but for me, the thing is like that I feel like it's kind of script that if I was an executive, if someone emailed me about it, like, hey, do you want to read this script? I'd be like, sure, yeah. And then once you read it, it gets in your blood. You feel like, oh my God, this is fascinating. Like, I'm seeing a little bit happen. You never quite know. You just have to go with your gut. And like, the truth is, all the scripts that I had that were number one, I didn't know they were going to be number one. To be blunt, I was hopeful. But I never 100% knew, because you also don't know what else is out there, But I just knew that I responded to it. And so that's the first aspect of it. The second thing that I do is I make sure I get out to as many people as possible, right? I go to like 100 people. I go as wide as possible, because what I'm trying to do is to make it so that my number one thing is I want everyone in town to know my client's name, because I want them to think of them for opportunities, for things down the road, And then the third thing I do really for the blacklist is I follow up. When the day that the votes go out, I say, hey, remember you read Cauliflower and you liked it? Just reminding you. That's it. It's a reminder email. It's like, when you get an email from Netflix and they say, hey, we saw that you liked Stranger Things. Season 3 is out now. That's it, And I think one of the reasons I had success is that I think I have pretty good taste and I know what people like. I would rather take out 10 great scripts than 20 mediocre scripts. So when people get a script from me or from anyone at Bellevue, they know that it's worth their time. So we're focused on quality and interesting material over generic stuff that feels like you've read it before. I have taken out commercial scripts, but I try to make sure that they're at least interesting commercial scripts. There's a spin on it, I think we first met about Capsule back in the day, right? Like, that's the platonic ideal of like a commercial script with and end up in the blacklist. A script with a really interesting something to say. That's still alive, by the way. We're still trying to figure out a way to make that happen. So that's the kind of stuff that I gravitate towards and that I'm looking for. And then I try to make sure as many people read it as possible.
Do you feel like there is a good success rate for the writers who score high on the blacklist moving forward in their careers?
It's completely a crapshoot.
Yeah.
It depends on what the next script is. It depends on how they are in the room. It depends on where they want to go with their career after that. It's a complete crapshoot. I kind of view getting people on the blacklist as like getting drafted up to the NFL, right? Do the number one draft picks always end up being the best players? They don't necessarily. Sometimes it's someone who was drafted in the 5th round or the 6th round. It's really hard you can recognize talent, which is all it is on the page. Nobody votes for best meeting, right? Like, to give the best meeting. They're voting purely based on the script. But a career is not based around just what's on the page. A career is based upon how are you in the room? How do you respond to notes? How are you at recognizing commercial possibilities for what the movie will actually be? Are you a problem solver? All these kind of things, So if you've been on the blacklist that tells people that you're talented and that you can do it, does that mean that you're going to have a career as a writer? It unfortunately is no kind of guarantee, But what it does, it gets you into the show. And then from there, we have to, I'm going to counsel you and I'm going to push you. But I've had clients get in the blacklist and never had another screenplay because they froze up, or that was their entire goal. Like, I had a client, their entire goal was to get in the blacklist. That was it. I was like, do you want to get a movie made? They're like, nope, just want to get in the blacklist. What do I do with that?
I've sort of seen that among like my peers, other writers my age who are like, they see the blacklist as
The goal.
the goal at the end of the year rather than
A marketing event.
rather than to sell something, rather than to get themselves attached to another project. It's all about the screenwriting rat race of competing with other screenwriters.
It should be a stepping stone to jump to the next level in your career, and then you jump, and then you jump, and then you jump, and then you jump, and you jump.
Yeah.
But sometimes for people, it's the end all be all, and they get into the show. Like I have, you look at people who are great college players or high school players, and then they get to the next level, where the college or the professional leagues, and suddenly they're too small, or they can't see or whatever. They were a big fish in a small pond, and they get into the real bigs, and they just can't function. And a lot of times that does happen. Where you get into the professional leagues, and it's not just competing with your buddy in like Script Pipeline or something. It's competing with Michael Green for a rewrite opportunity. I mean, Bobby Sablehouse. You remember Bobby when we first met? My producing partner at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy. I mean, he was the #1 high school prospect for football.
Oh, wow.
#1 in the country. And ended up going and playing, and I think. I mean, I can speak to it. Bobby can speak to it, but like, there's been Sports Illustrated articles about him that I was interviewed for. That he was the #1 high school prospect, and unfortunately didn't end up working out a spot that a scholarship he turned down, instead went to Tom Brady, and we're from there. And so it's it's one of those things where you can be really good at a certain level, but getting to that next level is hard.
And it's also just sometimes it's also random, like, right? I think also part of that's what you're saying about your buddy and the football thing. It's random,
Right.
or was this a strategic like thing that he did that?
No, it was random. I mean, he was picked it, but I think he was the best high school player in the world, or in the country. But he was going to a relatively small private school in Baltimore, and then you get to college and it's a whole different game,
Right.
I have also have a client who was an NFL player, and he played in college, and he's all-time passing leader for the college he went to, and he gets to NFL, and he also had like some injuries and things like that. It's just a different game.
Totally. No, and I feel that like now too, when you level up to the next level.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you saw it with your friend Steven Schneider.
Yeah. Or like a couple, I think it was just like 2 years ago. This was like 2020.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, I realized like, whoa, I've now somehow entered a different playing field.
Yeah.
And the choices I make,
Ripple effects,
and they have to be more specific, because you can't, it's like in, again, I know nothing about sports, but I do know that like what my friends who play sports, they say like you in high school, you have like, I don't know, a 10-second gap.
Yeah.
And in college, that 10-second becomes a 5-second.
Yeah.
And then in the professional, there's 0 seconds. You just have to like do it by instinct.
Yeah. And then you fuck up like a few times and you're out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of that is the thing, is like the further you go in your career, the more, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't like, fix things, but it is, you're playing in the big leagues, and you have to act accordingly.
How do you feel about the blacklist personally?
And it's great. I mean, there's two things. There's the blacklist itself, which is the annual list. And then there's the blacklist website, which is where people can upload their script and get feedback on it. And I feel, look, the blacklist as an annual list, I think, is a great thing, and spotlights writers and gives attention to projects. I mean, I've had projects get picked up because they're not even #1 on the blacklist. They were just on the blacklist, and it brought them to the attention of people they otherwise wouldn't. There's huge, producers in town, and they might not read every screenplay out there. And I think nowadays specs, back when you and I were coming up in the early 2000s, specs would sell, and they'd be like, oh, this person sold a spec to Universal or Warner Brothers or Paramount. Specs don't sell anymore. So how do you get attention? Well, one way to do that is the blacklist. And if you're a big producer, you're not going to be reading stuff like that. You're like, oh, I don't read newer writers. And they're like, well, this person was on the blacklist. Oh, well, they must be a good writer.
Right.
So it can be an imprimatur. And then the website is interesting in that, I really do think, I mean, no things are perfect, but Blacklist website, I think, is really quite good, and the best iteration of it, to my knowledge. And I've signed a lot of people off of the Blacklist, people who are now 4 years into a TV writing career, people who are years into a feature writing career, people who ended up on the annual Blacklist as a result of that. So I've had a really great success rate of finding really talented people off of the Blacklist. So, yeah.
Because what I appreciated about it also at the time was I felt like it spawned other.
Those lists aren't around anymore, by the way. They're all gone.
They're gone. The hit
List is gone. The blood list is gone.
The blood list is gone.
Mm-hmm. Well, the blood list still exists, but
Kaylee's at Brillstein now.
Yeah, but it exists now. They only do this thing, Fresh Blood Selects, where it's like screenplays that they like read and liked. It's not like you don't vote. No one votes on it anymore.
Oh.
And then the hit list doesn't exist because Tracking Board got bought by a different company.
Mm. How do you feel about, I guess, like, because what I like about the Blacklist is Franklin is like of our industry.
Yes, Franklin and he worked together. At Appian Way.
Yeah.
I was an assistant. He was a C prior to the Blacklist.
And he was like a fucking brilliant guy. Just like a brilliant dude.
He used to work at McKinsey. I think you can see that analytical genius.
Yeah. It feels like there's other contests, competitions, lists that come from like outside the industry. Does that?
There's a whole hope machine.
Right.
I think John Gary created that phrase.
Yeah,
that preys on aspiring screenwriters.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, look, I found the #1 Blacklist script last year through a contest that I really like called Script Pipeline. That's how I found Cauliflower, and also a script called In the End, which also we end up selling and end up on the Blacklist. So it's for me, like there are a lot of contests that are it's not so great, and then there's some that are great. But it's kind of like any producers, right? You got to do your research.
Yeah, Matt Masetich at Script Pipeline is awesome.
Matt's a close friend. Yeah. Good
Oh,
guy.
nice. You know these people great. Is there any other script thing before we wrap up you want to like shout out? Any other script contest?
I mean, the nickel is obviously still.
Although the nickel veers so Sundance-y that it's a little tricky. I don't think the nickel means what it used to be, personally, is what I think. I think the Blacklist has taken over for what the nickel used to be. Because, the nickel veers a little more indie, a little more Sundance-y, and so to some degree, I think the Blacklist has kind of taken up a little bit of that oxygen that the nickel used to have all to itself.